on May 8, 1945 ended. It was called Victory in Europe Day. Across the United States joyed. Church bells rang loudly, and crowds poured into the laughing, singing, and celebrating. In prisoner of war POW camps from Texas to New York, German soldiers, defeated in the war, were getting ready to go back to their homes to fight. But in a small POW camp near Fort Deans, Massachusetts, something very different was happening. Something no one expected. In this little camp, American commanders told a group of German women prisoners that they were free to go home. These women had been captured during the war and brought to America. But instead of jumping at the chance to leave, many of them did something surprising. They asked to stay in the United States. They didn't want to go back to Germany. These women weren't typical prisoners. They were part of the German Women's Auxiliary Corps, a group that helped the German military in roles like nurses, radio operators, and office workers. They were young, mostly between 18 years old, and now they faced a big decision. Go back to a broken Germany or stay in the country of their... Why would anyone choose to stay in a prison camp instead of going home? What made these women want to remain in a foreign land, far from everything they knew? Before we dive into their incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching or reading this from. Your location helps us connect with people all over the world who are learning about this unique moment in history. The story starts 6 months earlier, in November 1944. That's when the first group of German women prisoners arrived at the small camp near four larger camps for male prisoners. This one was much smaller, holding fewer than 60 women. These women had been captured in France and Belgium as the German army was pushed back by Allies. They had worked in different jobs for the German military, like sending radio messages, helping in hospitals, or handling paperwork. The camp was run by Captain Margaret Sullivan, one of the few women officers in it. She remembered the day the German women arrived. They stepped off a truck, looking unsure, and wore worn-out gray uniforms, some with badges they had once been proud of. Among them was a 23-year-old Ingrid Brenner from Hamburg, Germany. Ingrid had been a radio operator, sending and receiving messages for the German army. She believed she was helping her country stay strong. Now, standing in an American prison camp, she held tightly to a small leather diary. It was her only link to the life she used to know. The first few weeks in the camp were tough. The German women stayed quiet, sticking to themselves. They spoke in low voices only in German during meals. They followed the camp's rules without complaining, but they seemed distant, their faces showing they were strong. Captain Sullivan noticed how they carried themselves, standing tall like soldiers, even though they were prisoners. They seemed more disciplined than some of her own Americans. As fall turned to winter, something started to change. It began with little moments of kindness from the American Guard staff. One guard, Private James Morrison, a young man from a farm in Iowa, noticed a German prisoner named Anna Weber. She was a petite woman with blonde hair, and she had a bad cough that wouldn't go away. Without asking anyone, James brought her an extra blanket and a cup of hot tea made with herbs his grandmother had to use. Anna looked at him, surprised. Her blue eyes showed she wasn't sure what to think. She had been told Americans were cruel enemies, but here was this young man, not much older than her brother, showing her care. She took the tea and said a quiet thank you in German. For the first time since she was captured, she relaxed a little. News of these small acts spread around the camp. Another guard, Sergeant Robertson, whose parents had come to America from China, knew what it felt like to be seen as an outsider. He started teaching simple English words to the prisoners who were interested. He used hand signals and drawings to explain enough. Ingrid liked these lessons. She had learned some English in school and found she was good at picking up new words. More than that, she started to see the Americans differently. They weren't full of hate, as she had been taught. Instead, they seemed curious about women. They showed kindness in ways she hadn't expected. By Christmas 1944, things were starting to shift in a big way. Captain Sullivan wanted to do something for the prisoners, knowing many of them were sad and missing home. She decided to let them celebrate Christmas in a simple way. The women could make decorations from whatever materials were available, like paper and string. What happened next was a surprise to everyone. Ingrid, speaking carefully in her improving English, asked Captain Sullivan if the women could sing Christmas songs for the ends. She said they wanted to sing German songs but also try some American practicing. That night, in the camp's main hall, the 60 German women stood together and sang. They started with O Tannenbaum, a German Christmas song, their voices blending beautifully. Then, they sang Silent Night in English. Their accents made the words sound a bit off, but their effort was clear. Private James Morrison wrote a letter to his about it. He said, "Ma, I never thought I'd say this, but when those German women sang tonight, I forgot we were enemies. They seemed so young, so far from home. It reminded me of my sister Sarah and her friends back in Iowa. That Christmas evening changed things. The women started talking more words. They began volunteering for tasks, like helping in the kitchen or fixing clothes. It wasn't because they had to, it seemed like they wanted to help. Ingrid became a go-between, helping translate between the German women and the Americans. Her English got better every day, and she found she liked to connect people. She also learned that many of the American soldiers were just as homesick as the prisoners. They were all young people, unshelled. By February 1945, the camp felt different. The women no longer sat alone during meals. They chatted in a mix of English and German, and laughter could sometimes be heard. Sergeant Chun started informal classes where the women taught German or English. But then, troubling news arrived. As Allied soldiers moved deeper into Germany, they found terrible things. Concentration camps where millions of people had been killed or mistreated. Stories and pictures of places like Bergen-Belsen and Dachau reached the camp through American newspapers. Ingrid sat in the camp library, reading these reports with hands. The pictures were blurry, but the words described horrors she couldn't believe. She had never heard of these places, but they were in Germany, the country she had served. Anna found her there, tears running down her face. "Ingrid," Anna whispered in German, "is this true? Did our country do these things?" Other women gathered around, reading the same papers. They were shocked and confused. These women weren't die-hard supporters of government. They were young people who thought they were helping their country in a war. Now, they were learning their country had done things they never imagined. Captain Sullivan watched from a distance as the women tried to make sense of the news. She had seen German male prisoners react with shock to similar reports, but the women's pain seemed deeper. They were questioning everything they thought they knew about themselves and their homeland. That night, Ingrid wrote in her diary, "What kind of Germany will we go back to? What were we fighting for? I thought I knew who I was. Now, I don't understand anything." By spring 1945, the war in Europe was over, but the German women in Fort Deans faced a new kind of uncertainty. Across the U.S., male prisoners were being sent back to Germany, but the situation for these 60 wasn't clear. The government in Washington was still deciding what to do with them. Meanwhile, the women were asking themselves, did they even want to go back? News from Germany described a country in ruins. Cities were destroyed, families were separated or gone, and the Germany they remembered no more. Many of the women hadn't heard from their families in months or even years. They didn't know if anyone was waiting for them. At the same time, life in the American camp had become something they never expected. What started as a prison felt more like a community. The American staff didn't treat them like enemies anymore. They saw them as people caught in a terrible situation, just trying to find their way. Ingrid had started writing letters to a local family, the Hendersons, who visited the camp through a church program. Mrs. Henderson, a schoolteacher, was impressed by Ingrid's smarts and how quickly she learned English. She was also touched by how sorry Ingrid was about what Germany had done. "You're not to blame for things you didn't know," Mrs. Henderson told her. "What matters is what you've learned." But even if Americans forgave them, the women knew going back, people there might see them as traitors or failures captured. Worse, they'd return to a country that no longer matched the ideals they thought they were fighting for. As the day approached when the women would learn their fate, they talked more and more about what to do. They had found something special in the camp, a sense of belonging, a chance to make a difference, and hope for a better future. On May 15, 1945, Captain Sullivan called everyone to the main hall in Germany. The women stood together, nervous about what this meant for them. Captain Sullivan spoke calmly but kindly. Ladies, I have orders about your return to Germany. In 2 weeks, we'll arrange for you to travel to Europe. You'll go through camps for displaced people before going home. She looked at their faces, seeing both relief and worry. But what happened next caught her off guard. Ingrid stood up, her hands shaking. In clear English, she said, "Captain Sullivan, may I speak for some of us?" The captain nodded. Ingrid looked at the other women, then spoke again. "We've been talking for weeks. Some of us don't want to go back to Germany right now." The room went silent. Several guards looked confused. Anna stood up next, followed by 12 other women. They stood together, showing they had made up minds. Anna spoke slowly in English. "Captain, we know this is a strange request, but Germany doesn't feel like home anymore. The Germany we worked for it was." Captain Sullivan was stunned. All her years in the military, she had never heard of prisoners asking to stay instead of going home. She asked them to explain, and what followed was a flood of feelings that showed how much these women changed. Ingrid said they had tried to contact their families. Of the 14 women who wanted to send back, 2 learned their families had died in bombings. The others had no idea if any. But more than that, they had found something in the camp they didn't want to lose. "Here," Ingrid said, "we've learned what it's like to be treated with respect, even as enemies. We've seen kindness when we expected hate. We've had a chance to work and grow into better people." Their request was a big deal. According to the rules of war, they were still enemy prisoners, and the law said they had to go back to Germany. But their words touched the Americans deeply. Private Morrison, who had given Anna that blanket months ago, spoke to Captain Sullivan after the meeting. "Ma'am," he said, "these women aren't our enemies anymore. They're just people caught in something bigger than them. Sending them back to nothing was wrong." That night, Captain Sullivan sent a message to her bosses in Washington, explaining the situation. It would take days to get an answer, leaving everyone in a strained period. The women who wanted to stay kept working hard, as if they wanted to prove they deserved to stay. Ingrid became even more helpful, translating not just words but other better. Anna worked closely with the camp's doctor, showing she had a talent for nursing. Other women found ways to contribute, like fixing equipment or organizing records. But not everyone outside the camp was happy about the women's request. Word got out to nearby towns, and some people were upset. Local newspapers wrote articles asking why German prisoners should get special treatment while American soldiers were still fighting in the Pacific. Others, especially church groups who had met the women, supported them. They wrote letters saying the women had changed and deserved a chance. Mrs. Henderson, the teacher who befriended Ingrid, brought a group of local people to the camp to speak up for the women. "These women aren't the same as when they arrived," she said. "They've shown us what it looks like when people change." The story spread beyond the small town. Big newspapers in Boston and New York wrote about it, with headlines like "German prisoners don't want to go home" and "Captured women choose America." The women's decision became a symbol of bigger ideas about justice, forgiveness, and whether people can change. Letters came from other POW camps where German prisoners had heard about Fort Deans and were feeling unsure about themselves. Some even asked to be sent to the Massachusetts camp, hoping to delay their return. During this time, a German-American priest named Father Heinrich Müller visited the camp. He spoke to the women in German, helping them express feelings they couldn't put into English. His visit lasted 3 impact. He asked them tough questions. "You say you found kindness here," he said. "But what about the kindness you could show in Germany, where people are suffering? You say Germany isn't your home anymore, but doesn't a broken home need you to help rebuild it?" Ingrid thought hard about his words. She had been so focused on what she'd looked back that she hadn't thought about what staying might mean for others. Were they being selfish? Were they just afraid of facing Germany's problems? The women talked late into the night, some wondering if they should go back to help their country, others feeling they could do more good by staying and change. Finally, the orders came from Washington. The government said any prisoner who wanted to go back to Germany could leave right away. But for those who wanted to stay, there was a surprising option. They could be reclassified as displaced persons, not prisoners, and apply to live in America. This meant they wouldn't be prisoners anymore, but they'd have to find people to support them, jobs, and places to live in American towns. It was a scary but exciting possibility. The 14 women who wanted to stay were divided. 5 decided to go back to Germany, ready to face whatever was there. The other 9, led by Ingrid and Anna, chose to stay and build new lives in America. Finding support was easier than they thought. The Hendersons offered to take Ingrid in and help her find work as a translator. The camp's doctor arranged for Anna to train as a nurse at a nearby hospital. Other families in the community, moved by the women's stories, helped too. The women who chose to go back, they wanted to return to Germany not as defeated soldiers but as people who had learned about kindness in America. They hoped to share these lessons to help rebuild their country. On June 20th, 1945, the day came for the women going back to leave. The scene at Fort Deans was uncamped. Instead of a cold, formal send-off, it felt like a community friends. The 46 women who were leaving stood together, no longer looking like strangers. They carried letters, photos, and small gifts from the American Guard staff. Most importantly, they carried a new understanding about. Captain Sullivan spoke to them, her voice full of emotion. "You came here as our enemies," she said, "but you're leaving as something we didn't expect, as friends. I hope you'll remember that Americans can show kindness while still seeking justice, and that people can change even after the worst times." Ingrid, now speaking for those staying, answered. Her English was strong and clear. "Captain Sullivan, we thought we knew what America was when we got here. We were wrong. We thought you were our enemies. But we learned the real enemy was our own fear and hate." The women staying watched as their friends got on trucks to head to Boston, where ships would take them to Europe. There were tears, but they were tears of hope, not sadness. Both groups were starting new journeys, ones they had chosen for themselves. For the women who stayed, becoming part of America wasn't, but it was worth it. Ingrid got a job with the State Department, helping translate for people coming from Europe after the war. Her experience as both a German and someone who understood America made her perfect for the job. Anna became a certified nurse and later a head nurse at a hospital in Worcester. Her story became well known, and she spoke to groups about forgiveness and change. She never married, choosing to dedicate her life to helping others as a way to make up for her country's past. The other women who stayed found their own ways to contribute. Some married American soldiers they met at the camp, starting families that showed how enemies could become partners. Others became teachers, social workers, or businesswomen, always remembering the lessons they learned. The women who stayed kept in touch with those who went back to. Letters crossed the ocean, sharing stories of their lives. Those in Germany wrote about them hope. Years later, historians studied this unusual story. They found it had a big impact. The kindness shown to these women helped shape how America treated former war. It showed that treating people with respect could lead to change. 25 years later, in 1970, Ingrid Brenner Henderson, an American citizen with children, spoke at the United Nations, New York. She talked about peace and how people can change. She held up her old leather diary, the same one she had wins. "We learned that home isn't just where you're born," she said. "It's where you choose to live a life that brings out the best in people. We learned that forgiveness isn't something you're given. It's something you earn by doing better." Anna, now Dr. Anna Weber, went back to Germany in 1960 program. She saw a country that had rebuilt itself, not just with new buildings but with new values. She said her time in the American camp helped her understand how much Germany had changed because she had changed too. The women who returned to Germany in 1940 difference. They shared stories of American kindness, helping Germans trust their former enemies as partners in building a future. Some became leaders in groups that strengthened ties between Germany and America. The story of these German women became more than a historical event. It showed America's ability to take chances and help people change. It influenced how the U.S. treated refugees and immigrants for years to come. It proved that America's strength wasn't just in its army but in its ability to give people hope and opportunity. Ingrid ended her UN speech by holding up a diary. "In here," she said, "I wrote questions we all have to answer. Who am I? What do I believe? What kind of person do I want to be? America gave me the freedom to find new answers, different from the ones I was taught." This story reminds us that even in the worst times, people can choose to write new endings for their lives. It shows that redemption is possible when people chance. It proves that the greatest victory over hate is turning enemies into friends, prisoners into citizens, and despair into hope. Today, this story continues to inspire people in America, Germany, and beyond, showing that kindness ends of war.